There comes a moment in every woman's life when she realizes that protecting her peace is not selfish, is necessary. A high-value woman doesn't rise by avoiding challenges. She rises by learning how to stand firm in her truth, even when surrounded by noise, negativity, or manipulation. She understands something many people never learn. Not everyone deserves access to her heart, her energy, or her silence. Toxic people come in many forms. The critic who never sees your worth, the manipulator who twists your words, the jealous friend who celebrates your failures louder than your victories, the partner who drains rather than pours into you. But a high-value woman never fights toxicity by becoming toxic herself. She does not shout, chase, or explain her worth to someone determined not to see it. Instead, she rises quietly, confidently, powerfully. A high-value woman knows she cannot control someone else's behavior, but she can always choose her response. She chooses peace over chaos, clarity over confusion, and boundaries over attachment. She listens to her intuition, that deep inner voice that whispers, "You deserve better. You deserve more." She honors that voice because she knows it has never lied to her. Toxic people want reactions, but a high-value woman offers no free access to her emotions. She refuses to let someone else's wounds wound her. She refuses to carry pain that does not belong to her. She knows that people project what they have not healed, and she chooses not catch every arrow thrown her way. She stands tall, rooted in her self-respect. Instead of asking, "Why are they doing this to me?" she asks, "Why am I allowing this?" That is the shift. That is the moment she takes back her power. She stops trying to change the toxic person and starts changing her relationship with herself. Healing from toxicity does not require fixing others. It requires elevating yourself beyond their reach. A high-value woman sets boundaries, and she sets them without guilt. She doesn't justify them, negotiate them, or apologize for them. Boundaries are her way of saying, "My peace matters, my heart matters, my energy matters." And she understands that the people who are offended by boundaries are usually the ones who benefited from her not having any. She chooses to surround herself with people who nourish her spirit, not drain it. People who clap for her when she isn't there. People who love her loudly, consistently, and without competition. She knows that high-value relationships are built on respect, not control. Most importantly, she does not allow toxicity to define her future. She learns the lesson, closes the door, and steps forward with grace. Not bitterness, not anger, just wisdom. Because a high-value woman knows that letting go is not losing. It is choosing. She becomes stronger, more grounded, more aligned. She becomes the woman she needed during her hardest moment. And from that strength, she leads with compassion because she knows that toxic people are not powerful. They are simply unhealed. But she is healed. She is intentional. She is powerful. She is a high-value woman, and nothing toxic can shake a woman who knows her worth. High-value women protect their peace. A high-value woman understands deeply and intentionally that her peace is not just a preference. It is a priority, a necessity, and a form of emotional wealth that must be guarded with clarity, courage, and conviction. She knows that peace is not something that simply arrives, nor is it something that others casually hand to her. Instead, it is something she must cultivate, nurture, and defend, especially in a world where noise, drama, and negativity are often louder than truth, growth, and wisdom. She does not protect her peace because she is fragile, weak, or fearful. She protects it because she has learned through experience, heartbreak, transformation, and self-awareness that peace is the environment in which she becomes her best self. The woman she is capable of being, the woman she is proud of being, and the woman who can rise above circumstances that once hold her down. She recognizes that without peace, her mind becomes clouded, her decisions become shaky, and her energy becomes scattered. With peace, however, her clarity heightens, her confidence strengthens, and her direction becomes unmistakable. A high-value woman protects her peace by first identifying what disrupts it. She pays attention to the conversations that leave her drained, the relationships that leave her confused, the commitments that leave her overwhelmed, and the behaviors that force hers to shrink instead of shine. She listens to her emotional signals. The tight chest, the anxious thoughts, the restless nights, and she honors those signals as sacred messages, not as inconveniences. She does not shame herself for feeling uncomfortable. Instead, she asks herself, gently but honestly, why does this situation disturb my spirit? This awareness becomes the foundation of her strength. She understands that peace is not found in avoidance, but in alignment. She does not run from people or situations out of fear, but chooses her environment out of wisdom. She is selective with her time, careful with her emotional investment, and intentional with the people she invites into her world. She knows that the right people respect her peace, while the wrong people try to negotiate with it, challenge it, or invade it. And she has learned through experience that those who ignore her boundaries are the same ones who benefit from her not having any. To protect her peace, she practices the art of saying no. And she says it without trembling, apology, or guilt. She does not apologize for prioritizing herself because she knows that every time she chooses her peace, she chooses her strength, her health, and her future. She understands that saying yes to everything is not generosity. It is self-abandonment. She refuses to abandon herself again. A high-value woman protects her peace by choosing environments that nourish her spirit. She surrounds herself with people who uplift her, not people who compete with her, criticize her, or drain her. She invests her energy in relationships built on trust, respect, and genuine support. She walks away gracefully and confidently from people who thrive on drama, conflict, gossip, or emotional manipulation. She chooses stillness over chaos, clarity over confusion, and love over self, sacrifice. She recognizes that peace does not mean a life without problems, but a life where problems no longer control her. It means responding instead of reacting, observing instead of absorbing, and letting go instead of holding on to what hurts. High women set firm boundaries. A high-value woman understands, with wisdom and emotional clarity, that boundaries are not walls built out of fear, but doors created through self-respect, self-awareness, and emotional maturity. She knows that without boundaries, people will shape her life according to their needs, their comfort, and their expectations while ignoring her own. She refuses to let her identity be molded by others, and instead, she creates a life that reflects her values, her standards, and her truth. She sets boundaries not to control others, but to protect the harmony within herself. She recognizes the difference between helping and enabling, between being kind and being used, between being available and being taken for granted. She says, no, not because she is cold or distant, but because she is deeply aware of her energy, her limits, and her emotional well-being. She understands that her time is precious, her heart is valuable, and her mind is not a dumping ground for other people's insecurities. A high-value woman does not allow toxic people to blur her boundaries with guilt, manipulation, or emotional pressure. She no longer entertains the phrase, "If you really cared, you would." She stands strong in her decisions because she knows that toxic people often rely on confusion to maintain influence. She does not entertain arguments that go in circles. She does not justify her choices to those who benefit from her lack of boundaries. And she does not negotiate with disrespect. Her boundaries are not open for debate. They are expressions of her self-love. She sets clear boundaries by communicating her needs with honesty and strength. She speaks with clarity, not fear, and she keeps her words aligned with her actions. When she says she is unavailable, she means it. When she says she will not tolerate disrespect, she follows through. She does not send mixed signals because she understands that inconsistent boundaries invite consistent disrespect. She chooses consistency as her shield and integrity as her guide. High-value women do not fear losing people. They fear losing themselves while trying to please people. She knows that anyone who truly values her will respect her boundaries, while those who leave were only there for what they could take, not for who she truly is. She does not chase after relationships that crumble under the weight of her self-respect. She knows that people who walk away because she set a boundary were never meant to stay. She sets emotional boundaries by refusing to absorb the negativity, insecurity, and emotional chaos of others. She understands that she is responsible for her healing, her joy, and her growth, just as others are responsible for theirs. She refuses to carry burdens that do not belong to her. She has learned that caring for someone does not mean saving them, fixing them, or sacrificing herself for them. She can be compassionate without being consumed, supportive without being suffocated, loving without losing herself. She sets mental boundaries by choosing where her attention goes. She does not allow toxic people to live rent-free in her mind. She refuses to replay arguments, obsess over opinions, or internalize hurtful words. She chooses thoughts that empower her, not thoughts that break her. She invests her mental energy into goals, dreams, and personal growth, not into the chaos of others. She protects her emotional boundaries by understanding what triggers her, what drains her, and what elevates her. She listens to her intuition, the subtle voice that warns her when something is wrong, the gentle whisper that guides her back to herself, the inner wisdom that tells her, you deserve better. Instead of ignoring these signals, she honors them and she allows them to shape her choices. She sets boundaries with confidence, grace, and strength, knowing that boundaries do not push people away. They filter out the ones who were never meant to stay. She becomes unshakable, not because life is easy, but because she no longer abandons herself for the comfort of others. High-value women know when to walk away. A high-value woman understands, with deep emotional intelligence and unwavering self-respect, that walking away is not a weakness, not a failure, and not a sign of giving up. Instead, it is one of the strongest, boldest, and most transformative decisions she can ever make. She knows that choosing to walk away is an act of self-protection, self-love, and personal liberation. She walks away not because she lacks loyalty, but because she refuses to remain loyal to situations that destroy her peace. She recognizes that walking away requires courage. The courage to leave what is familiar, even when it is painful. The courage to choose herself in a world that tries to convince her that her worth is tied to how much she tolerates, and the courage to close doors that only lead to disappointment, manipulation, or emotional harm. She understands that life becomes heavier when she stays where her soul is suffocating, and lighter when she chooses a path that honors her value, her growth, and her well-being. A high-value woman listens to the truth, even when it hurts. She pays attention to patterns, not promises, behaviors, not words, and effort, not excuses. When someone repeatedly shows her through their actions that they cannot treat her with respect, kindness, or sincerity, she does not argue with the reality of who they are. She does not cling to potential, fantasies, or the hope that they will magically change. She honors what she sees, not what she wishes for. And she makes decisions based on truth, not illusion. She does not wait for people to break her completely before she walks away. She does not wait for toxicity to become unbearable, disrespect to become normal, or emotional pain to become her daily experience. She trusts her intuition when it whispers, "This is not right. This is not healthy. This is not love." And she acts before the situation destroys her confidence or her spirit. Her ability to walk away early protects her from deeper wounds. A high-value woman does not beg for clarity, closure, or apologies. She knows that toxic people often refuse to provide any of these because confusion gives them power, silence gives them control, and avoidance gives them an escape from accountability. Instead of chasing answers from people who lack emotional maturity, she creates her own closure by accepting the truth, processing her emotions, and moving forward with strength and dignity. She heals herself by herself for herself. Walking away, for her, is not an emotional reaction, but a conscious choice. She does not slam doors. She simply closes them gently and firmly. She does not leave with bitterness, revenge, or hatred. She leaves with self-respect. She does not waste energy proving her worth to people who refuse to see it. She allows them to believe whatever they want while she steps into a life where she no longer needs to justify her boundaries or her choices. A high-value woman walks away with grace. She does not speak poorly of those she left behind because she knows that her peace is worth more than gossip, resentment, or dwelling on past pain. She understands that healing begins the moment she stops giving emotional space to people who never deserved it. She chooses to rise above because she knows that revenge is temporary, but self-growth is permanent. She understands that walking away is an investment in her future self, the woman she is becoming. It frees her from emotional clutter, mental exhaustion, and spiritual heaviness. It creates space for new opportunities, healthy relationships, and environments where she can thrive. She knows that every time she walks away from what does not serve her, she walks toward what strengthens her. Most importantly, a high-value woman walks away because she knows who she is. She knows her worth, her power, her heart, and her purpose. She knows she deserves respect, honesty, and peace. And she refuses to accept anything less. High-value women do not internalize toxic behavior. A high-value woman understands, with wisdom shaped by experience and deep emotional maturity, that toxic people behave as they do not because she is unworthy, unlovable, or inadequate, but because they themselves are wounded, insecure, and emotionally disconnected from their own truth. She knows that their behavior is a reflection of their inner chaos, not a mirror of her value. She does not take their cruelty as proof of her flaws, nor does she carry their disrespect as evidence of her failure. Instead, she separates who they are from who she is, and she protects her spirit from absorbing their negativity. She refuses to let toxic behavior define her, consume her, or weaken her. She understands that toxic people blame others for the pain they cannot face within themselves. They criticize because they cannot self-reflect. They manipulate because they cannot communicate, and they project because they cannot take accountability. She does not internalize their anger, their silence, their betrayal, or their inconsistency. She sees these behaviors for what they are: symptoms of emotional instability and unhealed wounds. A high-value woman knows that when someone speaks to her with disrespect, it reveals who they are, not who she is. When someone lies to her, it reveals their character, not her worth. When someone mistreats her, it reveals their brokenness, not her deservingness. She no longer asks herself, "What did I do wrong?" but instead asks, "Why do they behave this way?" She replaces self-blame with understanding and confusion with clarity. She does not allow toxic words to echo inside her mind. She does not replay hurtful conversations, question her value, or shrink herself to fit someone else's emotional limitations. She knows that internalizing toxicity is a form of self-abandonment, a silent agreement to believe what is not true. And she refuses to abandon herself again. She chooses to speak to herself with kindness, compassion, and truth, even when others do not. A high-value woman sets emotional boundaries around her heart, her mind, and her identity. She filters what she accepts, what she ignores, and what she releases. She does not absorb emotions that are not hers to carry. She does not take responsibility for reactions she did not cause, wounds she did not create, or anger that is not directed at her soul, but at the world inside the other person. She recognizes the difference between empathy and self-sacrifice, and she chooses empathy without losing herself. She knows that toxic people often twist narratives to escape accountability. They rewrite stories to protect their ego, not the truth. They blame others because taking accountability feels like a threat to their fragile identity. A high value woman sees through this emotional fog. She does not defend herself against every accusation because she realizes that some people are not seeking truth. They are seeking control. She does not try to convince toxic people of her intentions, her goodness, or her loyalty. She knows that their perception is shaped by their own fears, not by her actions. Instead of internalizing toxicity, she transforms it into wisdom. She uses every painful interaction to understand human behavior more deeply, to strengthen her emotional resilience, and to clarify what she will and will not tolerate in her life. She turns hurt into insight, disappointment into self-awareness, and heartbreak into boundaries. She becomes wiser, not wounded, clearer, not confused, stronger, not hardened. A high-value woman practices emotional detachment, not out of coldness, but out of self-respect. She detaches from the need for validation from people who cannot see her value, from the desire to fix people who do not want to heal, and from the urge to change people who refuse to grow. She understands that toxic behavior loses power when she stops giving it emotional meaning. She stays rooted in her truth, grounded in her worth, and anchored in her peace. She does not let toxic people rewrite her identity, her confidence, or her future. She knows who she is, a woman of depth, dignity, strength, and value. And she refuses to internalize anything that contradicts that truth. High-value women choose self-growth over drama. A high-value woman understands. With deep emotional intelligence and an unwavering commitment to her own evolution, that growth is her true power and drama is her greatest distraction. She knows that while drama satisfies the ego, growth strengthens the soul. Drama keeps her stuck in cycles of reaction, misunderstanding, and emotional exhaustion, while growth elevates her into new levels of clarity, maturity, and inner peace. For her, choosing growth is not an option. It is a lifestyle. She recognizes that toxic people thrive on drama, chaos, and emotional conflict because it gives them a sense of control, attention, or validation. She also understands that the moment she engages in their drama, she becomes entangled in a story that is not hers, a conflict she did not create, and an emotional storm she does not deserve. So she refuses to participate. She does not fight unnecessary battles. She does not join pointless arguments. And she does not get pulled into emotional games designed to confuse or undermine her. A high-value woman chooses self-growth by prioritizing her mental and emotional development. She invests her time in books that strengthen her mind, conversations that nourish her spirit, environments that push her to evolve, and habits that bring her inner calm. She knows that true growth happens quietly, consistently, and intentionally, not loudly, messily, or dramatically. Every day, she chooses to learn, to reflect, to challenge herself, and to become a better version of the woman she was yesterday. She understands that drama is often a reflection of someone else's unmet needs, insecurities, and emotional instability. When toxic people provoke, criticize, blame, or intentionally trigger her, she does not react impulsively. She pauses, breathes, and responds with wisdom, or chooses not to respond at all. She knows that silence, when used wisely, is a form of strength, clarity, and self-protection. She refuses to give her energy to situations that are beneath her emotional maturity. Choosing growth means choosing herself, her peace, her healing, her future. She does not chase validation from people who misunderstand her. She does not defend herself to people committed to misjudging her. She does not waste emotional energy trying to prove her worth to those who refuse to see it. Instead, she focuses inward, building a life so strong, stable, and fulfilling that the opinions of others lose their power completely. A high-value woman does not allow drama to interrupt her purpose. She is focused on her goals, her dreams, and her personal journey. She wakes up each day with intention, not chaos, purpose, not distraction. She knows that every minute wasted on drama is a minute stolen from her growth. So she disciplines herself to stay aligned with what truly matters: her peace, her values, her progress, and her vision for her life. She also understands that self-growth often requires emotional solitude. She welcomes moments of quiet reflection because she knows that silence is where truth speaks, where healing begins, and where transformation takes root. She uses these moments to check in with herself, to explore her emotions, question her patterns, release old wounds, and strengthen her mindset. She does not fear growth, even when it is uncomfortable, because she knows that every discomfort is an invitation to rise higher. Choosing growth means letting go. Letting go of toxic relationships, outdated beliefs, and old versions of herself that no longer reflect who she is becoming. She understands that growth sometimes requires grieving people, places, or habits that once felt familiar, but now hold her back. She embraces this process with courage because she knows that every ending creates space for a powerful new beginning. Most importantly, a high-value woman understands that growth is the path to freedom. When she chooses growth, she frees herself from emotional chaos. She frees herself from the opinions of others. She frees herself from the patterns that once trapped her. Growth allows her to rise above drama, to respond with grace, and to live with intention. Growth becomes her shield, her guide, and her identity. She does not just choose self-growth. She becomes it, she lives it, and she embodies it. And because of that, no toxic person, no emotional storm, and no drama can ever take away the power she has built within herself. In the end, becoming a high-value woman is not about perfection, comparison, or proving yourself to anyone. It is about rising into the fullness of who you are, with clarity, confidence, and an unshakable sense of self-worth. It is about choosing peace over chaos, truth over illusion, and growth over drama. It is about recognizing that toxic people cannot define you, control you, or diminish you unless you hand them the permission to do so. A high-value woman learns to protect her peace because she understands that her energy is sacred. She sets boundaries with courage because she refuses to betray herself for the comfort of others. She knows when to walk away, not because she is weak, but because she is strong enough to let go of anything that harms her spirit. She refuses to internalize the behavior of toxic people because she knows their actions are reflections of their wounds, not her value. And above all, she chooses self-growth because she knows that every step she takes toward becoming her best self is a step away from everything that once tried to hold her back. This journey is not always easy. It requires honesty, consistency, and a willingness to release the old stories that kept you small. But it is a journey that transforms you. A journey that brings you back home to your truth, your power, and your worth. You do not rise by fighting toxic people. You rise by outgrowing them. You rise by choosing yourself. You rise by becoming a woman whose peace cannot be stolen, whose boundaries cannot be ignored, and whose heart cannot be broken by anyone who does not honor it. Remember this always. You are allowed to protect your energy, to walk away from chaos, to choose healing, and to build a life that reflects your highest self. You are allowed to grow without permission, shine without apology, and love yourself without condition. This is what makes you powerful. This is what makes you unstoppable. This is what makes you a high value woman. Not in the eyes of others, but in the truth of your own soul. And when you rise into that truth, no toxic person, no painful past, and no emotional storm can ever take you away from yourself again.